Thanks, Derek and Bodell, and thank you all for turning out. We've got a pretty big night. I gave this series of talks in Victoria, going around different tracks, and I've had to praise it down a little bit for tonight, so I might rush through things a little bit, but hopefully you can take something away with you. I know when I go to conferences, or when I've got kids from my clinic going to conferences, I tell them they've got to bring home 3 things, just 3 things. So if each of you could take home 3 things, or even 1 thing, the whole night will be worthwhile for you. We're going to talk about what you feed your dogs, what foods are made of. We're going to talk about trying to design a reasonable diet. In the second half, I'll show you some diets that work, and you can see where you fit in through. I've got, at the end, I've got 3 diets that some of you have submitted, which I've been able to analyse last night, and we can discuss them. And we'll talk about supplements and things you might or might not use. As we said, I started years and years ago. I work with Harry Cooper, Dr. Harry, as a student, and Harry, as most of you know, has got a really keen interest in greyhounds, always has done, loves them as a breed, and Harry was always one to want to look at things scientifically. When I got out into practice, I was just bamboozled by the amount of mythology that was in not only racing greyhounds but racing horses. I spent a bit of time in horse practice as well. And gee, it's hard for us all to shift the chaff away from the wheat, when people say, well, you've got to use this or you've got to use that. So it's been one of my missions to try to put more science into the field of racing greyhounds. In '85, myself, along with Barry Hayward and Alec Haller, who I was working with then, started a group of veterinarians, Australian Greyhound veterinarians. We've built now to a group of 300 internationally. We have a very, very active email list where someone can have a problem and we can get answers back from all over the world. And your vets here, Greg Moore, John Katakazi, are very, very active participants in that, and you guys are lucky to have really, really good vets. What's going to affect our success? What's going to affect our success? Who am I talking to? The last 10 years, who's trained a winner? Last 10 years. Hands up if you've trained a winner in the last 10 years. Look at you. There. So you can all do it, You can all do it. The things that are going to affect us, though, are how much work you do, the genetics of the dog. Look, fast dogs breed fast dogs, and slow dogs breed slow dogs, and that's the law of the jungle. Injuries affect performance. Illness affects it. Parasites. I'll have a little bit to say about that as we go along. And then there's diet, and it's so easy to skip over diet, and yet on this email forum that I talk about, we talk a lot about bone problems, because that's easy. We can take x-rays and we can screw the bones back together again, or do whatever, that's easy. But what we call the metabolic problems, the water diabetes and the acidosis and cramping and these problems, they're much more nebulous and much more difficult to deal with. And so often, particularly once we'd started to have a real good look at nutrition, it's nutrition that gets to the bottom of it, and it's usually poor energy. So, and it's very easy to overlook as trainers, and we get worried about, well, whether their back's out or whether this is out or in or what have you, and often it can still come back to diet as our problem. What do you use? You guys will use a mixture of commercial food and fresh food. How are our diets worked out? It's trial and error, isn't it? Someone else will tell you to do this, someone will tell you to do that. Someone will whisper out the corner of their mouth that you've got to give them ground up chook feathers or something. And so hopefully by the end of the night, you know, you'll be able to say, okay, well look, this puts things more and more into perspective of what I can and can't do, what I should and shouldn't do. Now the commercial diets, the commercial dry foods, I don't think anyone would feed commercial wet foods, are based on what we know about foods, about what fat, protein, carbohydrates, mineral, vitamins we should have. They're also based on what foods are available, what's cheap, what's expensive, and meat is expensive, as I'm sure you know, and veggies and grain can be cheap. They're also these diets are also designed so that the poo is nice and firm and you can pick it up, and so it doesn't smell. You know, I didn't believe this. Talking to a dietitian for Hills one day, and they said, yeah, we have this measurement called pick-up-ability. So they've got to have the right amount of fibre in to make sure you can pick it up. And most of the commercial diets are fairly consistent in what they've got, but some of the cheaper ones are variable. So you might have on the label, it'll say lamb or beef or chicken. And the vegetables may be rice or wheat or whatever, and so we're not sure, and there's a lack of consistency in them, and they have to, when they're writing out the ingredients that are in the food, they have to list them in the order of volume that they're in there. So the food that there's most of goes first, and last goes down here, so that if they can put meat up the top, you'll say, oh, wacko, you know, this one's got beef in it, or it's all chicken or salmon or whatever. But if they split the ingredients, so, and rice is a real criminal for this, where they can take the rice and split it into bran and the grains of rice, then that if rice is the main ingredient, then it can push it down the list, and they can put the meat up, so it looks like that meat is the main ingredient. Most of the commercial dog foods have to be accredited by the Association of American Food Control Officials, and this will be on some of the bags that hopefully some of you bought. We can see this. And to be accredited by AVCO, you've either got to have your food analysed and have a guaranteed analysis, a GA, or you've got to have done a food trial. Now, foods in Australia, there's no control, okay? There's very little, I won't say no, there's very little control, and now anyone can make a dry dog food. And if you reflect back on this has just happened in the last few years, I think you'll probably think, gee, you know, there just seems to be so many foods out there now, I'm not sure what to feed. You know, so we go back 20 years ago, there was just a limited number of dry foods that were worth feeding to our dogs, but now it's open slather, and you guys get shoved a whole lot of information and marketing hoi polloi down your throats, and you think, what do I do? What does food do? Essentially, it's just building blocks for growth, repair of tissue, maintenance of the body, and the provision of energy. This is the big one, energy. And it provides vitamin minerals. Food sources we've got, pretty simple. Meat, dairy products, commercial dry food. I put commercial wet food there. I think the only time we use a can of pound now is when a dog's got to lose half a kilo quick smart. Fruit, veggies, eggs and water. Okay, that's what we've got to play with. What do they need in the diet? The big one is, no, it doesn't work. The big one is energy, a good supply of protein, fat, carbohydrates and minerals, vitamins and water. Now, we classify our nutrients into macronutrients and micronutrients. And the macros are the big ones, protein, fat and carbohydrates. Okay, and we know a lot about them. And I think, Kirsty, that paper, did this paper... We'll be posting it on the Facebook page. Yeah, there's a paper that Dr. Ariel Giles and myself wrote, Nutritional Requirements of the Racing Greyhound, and Kirsty will post that up. That's a refereed paper. It's got a lot of scientific facts in it, but if you're interested, there's good data there. So we know a lot about the macronutrients. The micronutrients, there's not a lot of work done. I'll tell you, there's virtually no work done except for, say, some data on vitamin D and data on calcium. So again, when you're being bombarded with the Buy Me products, there's no scientific basis to what they're saying. Categorically, meat's the best food for our dogs. You know, dogs need meat, and if we don't feed them meat, they don't well. And veggies and grains are the cheaper option. So the more that the dog food people can put vegetables and grain in their diet, and the less meat, the lower their costs are, and so it doesn't cost as much for you guys to buy it. Okay, so of the macronutrients, we'll talk a little bit about each of them. Let's talk about protein. It's really important for growth and repair of injured tissues. Proteins are made up of things called amino acids, little building blocks called amino acids. And there's 10 of them which are essential. Okay, we've got to have these. If they're not in our diet, it's this list here. You don't have to learn it off by heart, but if we don't have those, we don't thrive. So a complete protein food is something that's got the whole 10 of them. And here they are: meat, poultry, fish, eggs, milk, cheese, dairy products, and finally soya beans. And soy is the only complete protein that's vegetable based. And this is why the vegans and vegetarians love soy, love their tofu. Yeah, that's why, because it's a complete protein. They've got to have that to get those essential amino acids. The biological value of a protein then means how much of that protein source is able to be utilised by the body and not excreted out the back end. So foods with a high biological value are meat products, eggs, dairy. And vegetables have a lower biological value, and so here's a list. You can see eggs right up the top, milk, fish, beef. Soya bean comes in with a biological value of 72, and then rice, wheat, lower. We need to feed them meat. And the digestibility of the food simply is a measure of how much of the food can be absorbed. But even though we have this flash AVCO rating, it doesn't measure the digestibility of the food, and nor does it tell us exactly which amino acids are in there. And that would be really, really good if we knew that. But that would cost them a lot of money, so they're not keen on that. So the digestibility of the food, again, it's the same list. Eggs, meat, fish are all up the top, and then we get down into the vegetable food. So the meat-based products are much more digestible than the plant. So the nutritionalists measure digestibility simply by food in and food out, and about 80% is the most digestible that we can get of food. How do you measure it? How do you measure the digestibility of your food? You'd look at your dog: bright shiny eyes, good coat, normal feces, good performance. You know, are they running well? So that a sloppy mess like that, you've got to do something with your diet, and I'd much rather you aim for that one up the top left-hand corner. Now protein can be converted into energy, and if a dog's diet is low in energy, they'll break down protein to provide energy, and so we end up with these scrawny dogs. Okay, And I would suspect that you've all seen dogs like this. Sometimes if they come back from the breakers or wherever, where they haven't been fed well, they've been fed a lot of bread and stuff like that, they'll look like this because they're starting to break their own body muscle down to produce energy. We measure the protein to go on the labels on the bag as crude protein. And the crude protein levels on the bag doesn't tell us whether it's animal or vegetable, where it came from. It doesn't tell us the amino acid content, and it doesn't tell us the digestibility. So I could put a boot, an old boot or an old footy in the bag and say, look, this is 100% protein. But the digestibility of a boot is 0. All right. So what do we know? Let's look at what some research has done. So a lot of this was done in America at the University of Florida back in the 80s and 90s. They had, University of Florida in those days had a track, and they had some really keen researchers there. So they took two lots of greyhounds, two different types of food, and fed a high protein, high fat diet, okay, to one group. And the diet was 27% fat, 14.5%, 27% protein, 14.5% fat. And then they changed it round and fed them a lower protein and a lower fat diet. So what happens? The high protein, high fat diets were faster. Okay, so that's what we've got to look at working at. High protein, high fat diets. 0.2 of a second, 3 links over 500 metres. I'll take that any day. But then they increased the level of protein and found that a really high protein diet actually slowed the dogs down. And what we want to try to get is a diet where about 24% of the energy comes from protein. And 20% of the energy comes from fat. These are the most, this level of 30 and 20, 30% protein and 20% fat seem to be the optimum for giving good performance. And so this generated the 30-20 diets. Okay, now the first big one to come on our market was XP 30-20, which you may be familiar with. There's now a whole host of them. Eukanuba 30-20, XP 30-20, and if you look at a lot of diets now, they've got this 30-20 balance. That's what we're trying to achieve. Now, fat. Fat is a really, really, really important energy source for the dogs. Whereas, say, for humans, for us, carbohydrates are the big one. You know, you'll hear about these athletes, carbohydrate loading. We can't carbohydrate load a dog. You know, there's no point in giving a dog a bowl of pasta on race day. It's not going to make any difference. Fat's the important one for them. It's in a healthy, fit dog, it's the first macronutrient that they go to provide energy. Fats, when we feed them, they're broken down into fatty acids to produce energy and this high energy molecule called ATP. We just have to be careful with fats. They, in the diet, they go rancid. You know, that's why we should always keep a lid on our dry food container. And they put antioxidants in the food, in the dry food, to stop the fat going rancid. But a lot of the labelling will say, ta-da, you know, my food's got this antioxidant and that's antioxidant. And we think, oh, wow, this is great. But most of it's in there just so the fat doesn't go off. Okay. Now, fat provides 2.5 times the energy that protein and carbohydrate provide. And then more studies at the University of Florida showed that the dogs ran faster when they were fed a high-fat diet, 38% of the energy compared to a low-fat diet. But then they also found, like protein, that if you feed them too much fat, they slow down. And so what we're trying to aim for is a diet where the fat provides somewhere between 35 and 45% of the energy. Now, as we go along, I'll show you how we work this out, but it'll still come back to those 30-20 diets being optimal. Just like protein has essential amino acids, fatty acid, the fats have essential fatty acids. Our bodies can't make them, they've got to be consumed in food. And the essential fatty acids are the omega-6 linoleic and the omega-3 linolenic acid. And we need them in a ratio of about 5 to 1 to 10 to 1. And again, this will be on the labels of your food for most of the good food. Linoleic acid is the main omega-6. Well, where do we find it? It's going to be in vegetables, it's going to be in grain, it's in vegetable oils, saff oil, sunflower oil, canola oil, maize, and it's in chicken fat. Okay, this essential fatty acid is rich in chicken fat. In fact, chicken fat is the highest form of linoleic acid. Pork, beef, lamb, I've all got it, but chicken fat's a good one. So, who feeds chicken mince in their diet? Yeah, good stuff, isn't it? And oh, gee, another interesting thing about that you often find on the puppy farms, what do they feed? Chicken mince. You know, it's cheap, and the pups look good, and it's because of this high amount of fat in it. One of the diets we'll talk about at the end today has a component of chicken mince in it, which helps balance the diet out beautifully. The omega-3 linoleic acid, again we find it in seeds, nuts, vegetables, chia oil, flaxseed oil. Flaxseed oil is a rich source. Canola oil is quite good. Ordinary vegetable oil is a really good source of these essential fatty acids. Now, fish oil also is rich in omega-3s, but they're not the essential ones. They're EPA, isopentanoic acid, and doxahexanoic acid. This is very, very good for joint health. But these aren't essential fatty acids. They're good in a diet. They're good in a diet. And again, I'll bet there's a lot of you feed a fish oil capsule or feed some sardines, things like that, to provide those fatty acids. If we talk about carbohydrates, carbohydrates are sugars, starch, and they come from vegetables and grain and fruit. And carbohydrates are a good source of energy, not as good as fat, but they're a good source of energy, really good for us. These carbohydrates get broken down into glucose, and then that in our body we convert it into glycogen, which is stored in our muscles and in our liver. And that's the first source of energy that they're going to use, or one of the sources of energy that they're going to use when they start exercising. That glycogen gets broken back down into glucose to produce energy. Carbohydrates, because they're so high in grains, vegetables and fruits, can be the main energy source in some of the cheaper dry foods. And I'll show you one of those later on. So if a dry food is cheap, you can bet your bottom dollar it's got a lot of veggies, grain, etc. in it, and not a lot of meat. Starch. Vegetables store starch, or store their glucose as starch. And we can burn up some starch. We can utilise it, but if it's uncooked, it tends to ferment in the bowel, and we can get loose, sloppy poo. If it's cooked, and most of the dry foods then are cooked to get the dry food pellets, that increases its digestibility. So be careful of too much starch. There's another thing, and I think we've largely got this sorted out now. a lot of plants will have these chemicals called phytoestrogens. These are compounds that act like the female hormone estrogen. They may cause infertility. I don't know about their effect on performance. Where do we find these phytoestrogens? They're in flaxseed, not flaxseed oil, but in flaxseed. They're in soy products, and they're in the legumes, beans, peas. We worked this out at my clinic in Melbourne at Monash about 5 years ago. We had 2 stud dogs, and their tadpoles, their sperm, were swimming in circles rather than going in a straight line. It just didn't seem to make sense. And we looked at the food, and the food was very, very high in soy. We went back to the manufacturers and said, look, we think you've got a problem here. They, of course, denied it. They've changed their formulation now. These dogs went off that product, off the soy, and it took about 10 weeks, the life cycle of a sperm's from a tiny little germ cell to a mature tadpole's about 9 weeks, and it got sorted out. So I just put it there because it's something we need to be aware of. As I said, I don't know about performance. No one knows about performance, but if you've got a stud dog that's going off a little bit, it's something that we should think about. That's the macronutrients, protein, fat, carbohydrates. Now the minerals and vitamins, much less studied about them. Where do we get them? Fresh food, commercial dry food, and supplements. I was talking to a nutritionist from one of the big companies a couple of years ago about these supplements. You know, in Australia there are 2 suppliers of multivitamin mineral mixes. Okay, so no matter who you are, if you want to produce your own multivitamin amino acid mineral mix, you've got to go to one of these 2 and say, well, look, this is what I want in my food. I want X, Y, Z. So you needn't think that when you read the blurbs on the side, you needn't think that each little company sitting in the back room grinding up their vitamin B and their vitamin C. It just doesn't work that way. They all come from the same place. Fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E and K. Vitamin D, really important in calcium and phosphorus metabolism. Vitamin E, a really important antioxidant, particularly in our dry food. And then we have the water-soluble vitamins. The B group vitamins, which are really important in energy production. We need vitamin B12 to be making red blood cells. Vitamin C. Now dogs make their own vitamin C, and there is a paper that shows quite clearly that if you feed too much vitamin C, it'll slow the dogs down. So you don't have to worry too much about providing any vitamin C. And across the board, I rarely see, when people fill out those diet sheets, I rarely see people that are putting vitamin C in. Some people like to use a product called Ester C, but you just need to be a little bit careful about that. The macro minerals, the big ones are calcium and phosphorus, bones and teeth, energy production, muscle activity. We need them. Calcium, lots of sources, dairy, fruit, veggies, commercial foods. We need to have some vitamin D for the absorption of calcium. They'll get some vitamin D from sunlight, but not a lot. It hasn't been fully quantified, so we do need to have some vitamin D in the diet. It's difficult to measure in all the diets. It's difficult to measure how much calcium's in there. Now the NRC, which is the National Research Council, a really, really big group that's heavy on nutrition, says that we need 50 milligrams of calcium per kilogram of a dog. So the average 30 kilogram dog's going to require 1.5 grams. What's 1.5 grams? About 1/4 teaspoon. Okay, a 15th, a small amount. Now, by law, I've also found out that the dry foods have to have between 1.1 and 1.8% calcium. So we know that. So I did some maths, and 200 grams of dry food, 200 grams is going to be about a cup and a half, depending on what size cup you use, will have 2.2 grams of calcium. And 500 grams will have 5.5. That's nearly a teaspoon. Let's go back. We said we needed 1.5, right? And our dry food, virtually 200 grams of any dry food is going to provide enough calcium in the diet for your dog. So most racing dogs are going to get enough calcium in their diet. Does it hurt if you give some calcium in the diet? No, it doesn't. But I just would be cautious about feeding teaspoons and teaspoons of calcium. It doesn't seem to help. I don't think you can overdose calcium, but it's probably going to hurt your pocket. Where we really need to be careful with calcium is in puppies. Okay, we have to have a calcium to phosphorus ratio of about 1.2 to 1.4. If you feed too much phosphorus or too low calcium, you'll end up with this disaster. And look, sadly, it still happens from time to time. I don't think, not so much you guys, but some areas of New South Wales, they just don't seem to get the message, and there's still the odd litter will come through like this, and you think, you know, they spent all that money on semen and inseminations and sometimes a Caesar, and then they don't feed properly. If you feed a lot of meat, which is very high in phosphorus, right? A lot of meat which is high in phosphorus, you can do this. You can do this quite easily. So if you're feeding meat, you've really got to up your calcium intake. Other macro minerals we deal with: magnesium, which can be important with cramping dogs, sodium, chlorine, potassium, very, very important electrolytes for fluid balance. Then there's a whole host of micro minerals. Cobalt, you know, we used to hear a lot about cobalt. Thanks God we don't now. Zinc, fluoride, iron for formation of blood, chromium for pancreas function, iodine for thyroid function. But these are micro minerals. We don't need a lot of them in the diet. And all the commercial dry foods, and certainly all the supplements, will be loaded with these. You know, so don't go overboard thinking you've got to be actively supplying these in the diet. Fibre. We need about 3 to 5% fibre in the diet. It needs to be there for normal bowel function. Too much fibre can stop the absorption of calcium and stop the absorption of fats, but that's not common. Certainly, cooking our food increases the digestibility of the fibre. Most foods, when we read through the label, will contain beet pulp, and beet pulp's a really, really good source of fibre. Some of it, the more soluble parts of that, is utilised, is absorbed and utilised for free fatty acids to go into glucose, and the rest, the insoluble fibre, helps improve the pick-up ability of it. Righto. Now, excuse me. This is the big deal: energy. How much energy do we need? We need energy for just our normal day-to-day activities, temperature regulation, and we use it during exercise. Okay, that's where we need our energy. Now, the average 30 kilogram greyhound needs about 1,700 kilocalories of energy per day. Don't get too confused with that. We'll talk about those levels a lot. There's a flash formula that we use, and if you want to talk in terms of kilojoules, you can convert it that way. But the average greyhound needs about 1,700. And so a big 38 kilogram boy is going to need over 2,000 kilocalories per day. We can graph it. Wow. As far as allowances for energy, I think this is a bit theoretical. Certainly in cold weather, you need to provide a little bit more energy, which is simply done with a little bit of extra oil, a little bit of extra chicken mince. Occasionally, with the first onset of the cold weather, we will see some metabolic problems. Like, it's not uncommon in cold weather to see a few dogs come down with water diabetes, or you might notice your dogs are just drinking a little bit more than usual, weeing a little bit more than normal. Some dogs will cramp. You can even get acidosis. It's because the dogs are using more of their energy to stay warm. But then most of us now have insulated kennels, we rug our dogs, blah, 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 and it's not a great consideration. It's just something that you need to be aware of. Similarly with hot weather, dogs will expend a lot of energy panting, but then most of our kennels are air conditioned. Nervous dogs, excitable dogs, they're a problem for us all, and I think anyone that's ever had one will agree. Their energy demands are much higher than calm dogs. Now this is amazing. The guys at Florida worked this out, that during a race, during a 500-metre race, a dog will only expend about 75 kilocalories, which is just a little bit more over maintenance. So for leading up to race day, we need to provide a few more calories, but you don't have to go overboard with this, because essentially when you get your dog to race day, the dog should be loaded, okay? There should be enough glycogen in the liver, enough glycogen in the muscles for the dogs ready to go. You can't, on the day of the race, you all know this, you can't load them up with anything extra that's going to make them go faster. You've done your work leading up to the race. Where these characters fit in is very difficult, and that's up to you as the trainers to work out, but just be aware that those loopy dogs need a lot more energy. So energy comes from fat, and 1 gram of fat gives us 8.5 kilocalories, whereas 1 gram of carbohydrate and 1 gram of protein only gives us 3.5 kilocalories. So the fat gives us a lot more energy than the protein and the carbohydrates. Okay, let's have a look at a diet, a commercial diet. Now this diet contains 25% crude protein, 15% crude fat. Remember, we're looking for 30-20s. So it doesn't tick that box. Now I do my maths. This beauty. Okay, I'll do my maths. So crude protein, we've got, it's 25%. 25% of a kilogram is 250 grams, if we're all happy with that. Multiply that by 3.5 and we get 875 kilocalories of energy coming from protein. The crude fat in this diet's only 15%, 150 grams, multiplied by 8.5. You see the difference? Even though there's less fat, it's providing much more energy than the protein, and similarly for the carbohydrates. And this all adds up to 3,830 per kilogram of food. This is what the label says, so we're pretty close. We're pretty close. Now, the fat then is providing, of all the energy of these 3,830 kilocalories, the fat's providing 33% of the energy. And our target is 35 to 45, so that's okay. I'm pretty happy with that. Similarly with the protein, it's just a bit under our target of 24%. So if I was going to feed this food alone to give me my 1,700 kilocalories, I'd have to feed 444 grams. That's not a bad food. Now that was cop rice. okay, for those of you that use coprice. Who uses coprice? Yeah, yeah. A lot of people use it. It's not a bad food at all. We just need to be aware of its limitations, and so if I'm feeding coprice, I'd be putting more energy in the form of chicken fat or vegetable oil. And then if, you know, for those of you that are using coprice, I'll bet almost to a person you'll be adding some meat as well to up the protein. And look, it's a good food. The company that makes it are very, very reputable. Go on, what's going on here? Oh. Commercial diet too, okay? Righto. 30% protein, 20% fat, that's what we're aiming for, okay? That's our target. We do our maths and we get 415 kilocalories per kilogram. So this, I'm thinking this is a high energy food. I like this food. Fat's giving us 41% of the energy, bang on with our target, and protein's giving us 25, bang on. Now, if we feed this to get our 1700, we can feed less, okay? It's a more expensive food. This is XP 3020, okay? Good food. Oops. Just quickly, I won't dwell on this. How is the energy stored and how is the energy used? We have the high energy bonds in our bodies are called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and there's another compound called creatine phosphate. This allows me to go like this. I'm using up the ATP and the creatine phosphate. I can stop. I'm not puffing at all. I don't need any oxygen. You know, it's like most of us could run for 10 metres, most of us, and not be puffing. I'll take you out of that, Judy. I'm not going to make you run. And then we swap over to what we call anaerobic metabolism, where we're not breathing. We don't have to breathe, and then we swap over to aerobic metabolism where we've got to breathe. Now this swap over occurs after about 15 to 20 seconds. So the group of dogs that use this anaerobic metabolism are more our sprinters, and the stayers are the ones that about 15 to 20 seconds can swap over and start using aerobic metabolism. Can you train a dog to be more aerobic? Yes, you can, because it's not uncommon for you to take, say, a dog that's been a 400 metre dog, put it up over 500, couple of trials over 500, bring it back for the race for 400, and they'll compete just that little bit more quickly. That's not a given. And you've still got the genetic component, the makeup of that dog, for you to work out whether they are going to be able to go run on and become 500, 600, 700 metre dogs. And you know, like at the moment, the world's full of 300 and 400 metre dogs, isn't it? You know, there's. I think we'd all love to have a 700 metre dog in our kennels. It's just, life would be easy. So this is just reiterating what I've said. In the first 7 or 8 seconds, we're basically anaerobically, we don't have to breathe, and then we have to swap over after about 15 seconds. Where the dogs in a race do need extra energy is when they're trotting along and they get bumped and they've got to move quickly sideways, or they get knocked back and then they've got to accelerate. Then they really burn up some calories there. Muscle fatigue, why do they tire? Now this is not clear, but there is some nervous fatigue where the nerves supplying the muscles seem to tire, as well as a shortage of fuel in the muscles, the glycogen, the ATP and the creatinine phosphate. And most importantly, what I want to point out to you is that the muscles can fatigue because of waste accumulation. And this is a list of the factors that are involved. And I want you to see right down the bottom is lactate. Okay, and lactate, the exercise physiologists now consider that lactate is not at all important in muscle fatigue, and yet you read every jolly label on the supplements you'll get, and there'll be something about stopping the acid. Lactate is lactic acid, stopping the acid, preventing the acid, flushing the acid out. It's not a consideration. There are other factors, and don't be too concerned about trying to get rid of the lactate. It's not an important consideration. After the exercise, we've got 4 hours to help replenish the glycogen, the carbohydrate, the glycogen in the muscle, and the damaged protein. After any exercise, there is always some micro damage to our muscles. And if we take largely the 600 and 700 metre dogs, the next day, if you do a urine test on them, quite often the dipstick, the little bit on the end which measures blood, will be slightly green. The dipsticks can't tell the difference between blood and muscle pigment. And it's because of this microfibre damage. If any of you go and run 10 or 20 Ks, there'll be some blood if you want to go and wee on a dipstick the next morning. But we've got this 4-hour period, which is really, really critical to get the nutrients back in. Now, you probably all use lots of different things. A cheeseburger, a Mars bar, a 30-cent cone. They're all good, just so long as you get something in. I'm a great fan of Sustagen. Vanilla, never use chocolate Sustagen or you get a positive swab. This is easy to mix up in water or milk and feed your dogs as soon as you can. You know, if you've got 2 or 3 dogs and you're somewhere in a later race, so you've got dogs that have been sitting there for 2 or 3 hours, I think as soon as you can get out to your trailer or your van, give them something. 4 hours you've got. There'll be a lot of talk about branched chain amino acids. The branched chain amino acids are essential amino acids. So they're in meat and all the meat-based products. They're certainly in Sustagen. The bodybuilders are really big on this type of stuff. You know, the kids will go and pump in the gym all day and then come home and have their protein shakes and what have you. I think there's never been a study where people have given these as extra foods. Some of the gold products have John Conkey, what is this? There's something gold.
Sprinter Gold. Muscle Pro.
Muscle Pro, yes. They've got them. I don't think you need to worry about them. If someone's trying to sell you a product because they've got branched chain amino acids, just nod and agree with them. No, don't try to feed them glucose, don't try to feed them honey. All it does, if we take a tablespoon of honey or whatever, high in glucose, the blood sugars levels go sky high. The body says this is not right. We secrete a lot of insulin to pump the glucose back into the cells, and then that high level of insulin has a negative impact on the dog's performance. They don't need that, and a lot of you will probably do that. Don't worry about it. If you want to put some honey on the toast for breakfast or something like that, that's okay as a routine. It's not going to matter. But certainly not on race day, and not a lot of it. Not a lot of it. This happens not uncommonly in a veterinary clinic. Hey, look, he's just trialled brilliantly. PB. In the final next week. What do I give him? What can I give him? You've done your work. You know, whatever you did for the trial, you've done everything right. there is nothing. There is nothing that you can give them that won't get you into trouble with the stewards. I can assure you of that. And back when I had brown hair, I can assure you I tried a few things and nothing except the very, very illegal works. And we are all, you know, vets and trainers and owners, we're all subject to a whole heap of buy me products, which are often not needed. None of them are tested, I'll tell you, none of them are tested. You know, you can read this paper and see what's there or not. And they're often uneconomical. You know, some of these things are expensive. So let's go through a few. Carnitine, you know, a lot of human bodybuilders take carnitine, it burns fat. Okay, 20-year study in people, made no effect. I used to use a bit of carnitine in dogs and I could never ever see a difference. You know, we'd inject it intravenously, we'd inject it under the skin. There's plenty of carnitine in meat and other animal products. Don't worry about it. The glucosamine and chondroitin that will be advertised is good stuff for joint disease, and so is fish oil, and a fish oil capsule every day, particularly for young dogs being broken in, is very, very good for helping prevent cartilage breakdown and cartilage degeneration. Similarly, the curcumin, rosehip, and forsyth. Forsyth's a really good product for joint disease too in older dogs. Forsyth's a bit more expensive than the fish oil capsules. They tend to have an anti-inflammatory effect. The Epitalis that you're using, same stuff. That's the Forsyth stuff. They're okay. Eggs, you know, the mythology is don't feed eggs. Eggs have a product. The white of the egg has a product called avidin in it, which will lower the vitamin B levels of the vitamin B biotin. It's not a reality. One egg a day, you know, they're a great source of protein and fat, good source of energy, 70 kilocalories. You know, one egg and you've virtually got a 500-metre race done. One egg a day is not going to worry your dog. Thyroid hormones. Again, there is no scientific studies that says in a healthy dog, thyroid is going to help your dog. But we know from oodles of studies that greyhounds and other sighthounds, whippets, Irish wolfhounds, these type of dogs, have a lower thyroid level than other breeds of dogs. So if you go to a vet that doesn't know about greyhounds and you do a blood test, a full blood test, they'll come back and say, "Whoa, thyroid levels down, down, down. You know, we've got a supplement." That's waffle. That's waffle. They don't need it. There's just no studies to support that. Bicarb. Got to have bicarb to buffer the acid. And I've said the acid doesn't exist as such that we've got to worry about it. The lactate doesn't exist. And the bit of lactate that does occur after a race is all washed out and gone within 30 minutes, okay? And when you feed bicarbonate, it's very, very quickly absorbed, and the dogs, with their wonderful kidneys, excrete it. It's got no positive effect. Cobalt and vitamin B12. Now, there's probably some of you here in the room that got caught when the new rules came in. We need vitamin B12 to help make red blood cells. It's rich in meat and fish and eggs and in our commercial dog foods. And theoretically, high levels of cobalt can stimulate the production of red blood cells. Now, when the new rules came in, what happened? So we had to very, very quickly stop giving vitamin B12 injections and VAM injections, and some of the supplements were very, very rich in cobalt. Very quickly, trainers backed off the use of cobalt and B12. And what happened? I reckon two things happened. One, the dogs were a lot happier, you know, because you know some dogs would get a shot of B12 and a shot of iron and a shot of folate. And some of it would go into the muscle, and if any of you, when you go and have a vaccine or something, it often hurts a bit afterwards. So I think we had, across the board, the National Kennel was happier that they weren't getting these injections. And what happened to the times? Ever since we put this ban in, what's happened to our times? They didn't go backwards. They didn't go backwards. You guys are getting your dogs to go faster and faster all the time. It had no effect whatsoever. And blood counts, just my quick 2 bobs worth on blood counts. They're particularly unrewarding, I find, in fit, healthy dogs. Okay, for dogs that are training off a little bit, they're often worthwhile doing, particularly to look at the white blood cell counts. If the white blood cell counts are falling, that's an indication of stress, and if they're high, they're an indication of inflammation and infection. And certainly, when we look at what we call the biochemistry, the liver function, the kidney function, they can be a good indicator there where we've got poor performance. But across the board, back in the day we used to do lots and lots of blood tests, and the reality was it didn't give us a lot of information to go on. And if you reflect on some of the blood tests you've had, you think the results are a bit nebulous. We used to find, say, that low lymphocyte levels and sometimes high white blood cell levels. Some vets used to diagnose these as a virus infection, but when you pin those people down and say, well, which virus? There was no virus. And the PCV, the normal red cell count, I think it's good. I reckon it's good when you're first bringing a dog into work, particularly a pup, to get a baseline level so you know whether his blood count was 50 or 60, whatever it was, so that if the dog trains off and you have another one, you can say, okay, well look, 4 months ago he was 55 and now he's 45, we've got a problem. We know that stayers will have a higher blood count than sprinters. A lot of sprinters will have a low blood count of about 50 and they're fine, because all they've got to do is run their 15 to 20 seconds. And they don't have to breathe a lot, so they're not reliant on red blood cells for their energy. Arsenic is just like cobalt. Arsenic has never done anything except return a positive swab. The electrolytes, I've talked about calcium, so I'm happy for you to put half a teaspoon of calcium in your dog's food. Magnesium's important in cramping dogs. For the rest, particularly potassium, potassium's in so many supplements that we feed. The beta K, the slow K tablets, all the mineral and vitamin supplements, they're all rich in potassium. And I think you need to be careful with this. The most important thing that you can do is make sure they've got plenty of water. Because in a reasonable diet with some meat, some dry food, and maybe one mineral vitamin supplement, the dogs will sort the rest out. You don't have to load them up. This is just garbage. Kidney flushes. Got to flush the kidneys. Got to flush the bad stuff out of the kidneys. It's this waffle. None of us play a game of footy or netball and think, well, I better flush my kidneys, so I'll grab 2 teaspoons of salt, stir it up in a glass of water and drink it down. It's counterintuitive. It dehydrates the dogs. And a lot of this rubbish comes from the old horse products. And again, for most of those, it's rubbish as well. You give a greyhound enough water, it'll sort its electrolytes out. Boiling out, I hope no one here ever boils a dog out now. Boiling out's when we bring particularly young puppies into work, or dogs that have had a spell and they run and they end up frothy, and we think, we've got to boil him out, he's got too much bile in there, so we give them these injections or tablets in their eye which makes them vomit up. The froth's coming from their lungs. It's got nothing to do with their gallbladder or liver. please never boil a dog out. If the froth continues, well, you need to address what's going on in their lungs, and usually they've got some mild but chronic respiratory disease and they need some ventipulmin or some similar bronchodilator. Oh, when I first gave this set of lectures, chia seeds were the new one out the corner of the mouth. Look, there's nothing wrong with chia seeds. They're a good source of essential fatty acids, but there's nothing really whiz-bang about them. At the end, we can have a bit of a powwow if there's anything else. Dietary disorders, righto, cramping, young, excitable dogs. What helps? Because I've got no answer for it. What helps is calcium, magnesium. I think the magnesium tablets that I find best now are the Swiss magnesium tablets. They're good. Have a look at your training program, because often these dogs are unfit. And fat in the diet again. Fat in the diet. And they'll cramp too if they're injured, particularly in the quads. Probably more so the left quads than the right quads for me. Yeah, make sure they've got plenty of fluid, but increase the fat in the diet. Vegetable oil and chicken mince. Nervous greyhounds, look, they're a problem, and I've got no great recipe. The alpha-casapine, which you buy as Zilkine, will help relax some dogs. Similarly, feeding tryptophan, which ends up as serotonin in the dogs, will help some. Vitamin B1 will help some. And there's this spray called dog appeasing pheromone. And there's the thunder jackets. They all help it. We can only work it out by trial and error. Water diabetes and acidosis are similar in their cause. Excitable nervous dogs, low fat diets are a real problem. High workloads. Just be aware of that. Poor weight gain will leave that. Gastroenteritis, most common cause of gastroenteritis in my book is feeding bad meat, and it usually limits within 1 to 2 days. Nowadays, if I'm talking to a trainer and they want some antibiotics for the diarrhoea they've got in the dose, I say, no, look, just do nothing. Just wait for a couple of days and let's see what happens, because it's almost invariably comes from the food rather than from a virus. It's not like when we had the coronavirus, enteritis or parvovirus going around. But a dog that's really, really badly affected, particularly one in work, I would put them on a drip every time and give them 1 or 2 litres of fluid, and it'll help save them. From losing weight, dietary allergies, not uncommon. Okay, not uncommon. And these are the dogs that fall off a little bit. Their stools are always loose. They've got a bit of mucus in their stools. They're often straining. They'll go 3 or 4 times a day. You're always cleaning up after them. All of these things should prick your mind as a trainer. Say, gee, look, what else is going on here? What's the problems? The criminals can be beef, horse, wheat, rice. It's a whole host of things, and you've got to do a bit of trial and error with your diet. Puppies, we've talked about the calcium phosphorus. The calcium supplement for me of choice is Calci D, and I like it. And this is the label off the Calci D, and you dose according to what your dog is doing, and you dose according to the amount of meat you're given. So I really like this product. So feeding half a teaspoon to your racing dogs or 1/4 of a teaspoon's not going to hurt them. Okay. So in summary, for calcium, if you're feeding meat to puppies, you've got to give them calcium. And most commercial good quality foods for puppies have got more than enough calcium in them. But supplementing your race dogs with calcium is not going to negatively affect them. We'll forget about pregnant and lactating bitches. and our retired dogs that end up with bad backs like this, just don't let them get too fat. It's a fascinating photo. This is a fascinating photo. This is shot with a heat-seeking camera. The Iditarod race, that big race that goes through Alaska. So it's a 10-dog sled team. It just goes to show how the dogs have to puff and pant to get rid of their heat. All the heat's in their heads. It's an amazing, amazing photo. Okay, I reckon we should have a bit of a break. I can see food. Diets that work. Okay. I think there were 5 or 6 diets that work. Now, the first study was carried out by an eminent veterinarian in Melbourne. When the premium foods first came out, and you may remember there was Eukanuba, and then Hill Science Diet, and then there was Nutrients, and all of a sudden these pet food companies were taking feeding to another level, and they were saying that you can feed them this and that's all you need to feed. Can any of you remember that? Some of you? Yeah, okay. So I said to Hills, all right, give me a couple of bags. So I got my trainer, we had 5 dogs in work, and we fed them Hill Science Diet for 8 weeks. We gave them nothing else except water. This diet was 1,600 kilocalories, so it was a bit light, but during that time all the dogs won a race. Their blood counts, I did blood counts before and after, that didn't change. Their coat quality improved. Tom was able to pick up their poo much more easily, and he had more time to mow his lawns. Okay. Now at the same time, and I didn't know that this was going on until a few years ago, but Michael Bella, another good colleague, Greyhound vet in Melbourne, he did a similar study with Robbie Britton using Eukanuba, and sadly they lost their data. But I had a long talk to Rob Britton about this, and they found exactly the same things. And we got talking about his diet, blah, blah, and he said to me, you know, Ray, I don't know why I changed, you know, because I'll show you his diet directly. I don't know why I changed, but, you know, somehow or other he's now got this flash diet with soup and all kinds of things. I thought it was a really interesting comment. And so, and Tom, in study 1, he's back to making his own soup and adding vegetables and things like that. So I'm just not quite sure what motivates. And I say to him, mate, you know, you're spending an hour a day preparing food. You know, you could do it more efficiently, I think, and it'll give you more time to be working on the dogs. He's got his laser that we use for injuries. It just gives you more time in general for maintenance. Case study number 3. Now, this is a diet from a really good colleague of mine up in Brisbane, Leonie Finster. Leonie's a vet, a really, really good greyhound vet. She raced dogs for a number of years. She would only race boys. She said, I haven't got time to muck around with the girls. And here was her diet. 60 grams of Science Diet Active in the morning with moisturised, and then for dinner some lean beef, some more Science Diet, no electrolytes or multivitamins, okay? Just the meat and the Science Diet, that's all the dogs got. And she said the dogs all thrived. She would work her dogs hard until they were race fit, and then it was maybe 1 or 2 runs a week, if that. Otherwise they hardly got any exercise, so she got them fit and they thrived. Now when we looked at the energy of this diet, it got her up to 1900. Okay, this diet worked. When I costed it last time, it costed a bit over $5. Very easy, because Leonie didn't have a lot of time to muck around feeding them. Okay, now this is Robbie Britton's diet. This is a diet that he published for Greyhound Racing Victoria. Oh, I must say to Greyhound Racing South Australia, your food's better than whatever we got it in Victoria. There's fresh chicken mince. Okay, so he's got that one sorted out. and then some kangaroo. Now kangaroo is low fat, okay, we know that. High protein, but it's low fat. So I figure those two are countering themselves out. I just forget which premium kibble he was using, probably Eukanuba. A couple of slices of brown bread. The soup, he says, you know, they spend a lot of time making this soup. An egg every second day. Okay, now then what supplements? Some fish oil and vegetable oil, a potassium supplement that includes magnesium and zinc, some calcium, and another mineral vitamin supplement. I said to him, well, you could probably drop that last one out, but he didn't want to. Yeah, so pretty good diet, nearly 2,500 kilocalories, and he works his dogs hard. You know, he works his dogs harder than a lot of other people, and they thrive on that level of energy. You know, so say, whereas if you go back to Leonie, she didn't work them as hard and only had to give them 1,900. Right. Number 5. Okay. 300 grams of beef, 300 grams of kangaroo, same thing. The minced beef has got a fair amount of fat in it, and you should always choose fatty meat over non-fatty meat. Some kangaroo. This is a new food on the market, a la carte lamb. Some beef fat, 5 mils of vegetable oil, some mixed veggies, bread, pasta, rolled oats. His rolled oats are raw. Who was I talking to at lunch? Yeah, soaks yours. I think yours soaking is a good idea. 1 beta-K tablet and a teaspoon of Cal-CD powder down there. And in the morning they have a wheat mix and a bit of milk. Stew every couple of weeks. No other mineral or vitamin supplements. Now this is Anthony Azzopardi's diet. And I didn't believe this. And I got pretty good at collecting diets, at asking questions, you know, backwards and around to try to flush things out. And no matter which way I questioned him, he was firm on this. You know, I'd say, well, you know, what other multivitamins do you give? Or, you know, did you give 2 or 3 scoops of this, just trying to eke it out? So I think here's two pretty big successful trainers that Robbie Britton's just got 1 mineral vitamin supplement, that's probably for ammo, and Anthony Azzopardi, who's equally as successful, or certainly has great dogs, on almost a similar level of energy. Okay, so that works. And I would like to think a lot of you are relating to that diet, going through and thinking, yeah, that's okay, that's what I'm doing, well done. Okay, now, this diet, the guy that uses this diet came to one of the first seminars I gave in Victoria, down at Geelong, and then he turned up at one at Cranbourne. And he said, I took what you said on board, so this is weeks later, and he'd changed his whole feeding to some XP3020, some canola oil, some milk in the morning, with a bit of XP3020. Post-race, his sustagen, and there's, someone asked about what level of sustagen, a couple of scoops that come with it, or a couple of tablespoons in milk, and a stew every 1 to 2 weeks. 2,200 kilocalories, okay? Pretty good. He was really, really happy with this, okay? So, diets that work. So I reckon, you know, if you look at your dogs, they're running well, their coats are good, they're maintaining their weight, they're not dehydrated, your diet's okay. Okay, your diet may be in excess in some areas, but it's okay. I hope we can get this sorted out. I want you to think in terms of kilocalories of energy in the food. Work towards that target of 1,700, and I want you to think in terms of grams of food and not handfuls of cups, because if we get a chance later, I brought along some cups, and we can say cups vary in different sizes. Some will be 80 mils, some will be 125 mils, some can be 150, 180, and when I'm reviewing those diet sheets that some of you have sent in, if it just says I've got a cup of dry food, well, I'm really guessing as to exactly how much it is. And look for your duplication of minerals and vitamins. Potential risks of food, be cautious with knackery meat. You really need to, when you get it, freeze it if you can. Freezing it helps kill any neospora that's in it. I don't like it because we're not sure what the source is, the protein source, whether it's roux or beef or lamb, in spite of what they tell us. We don't know the fat or protein content, and you've got to be careful of drugs. And people still, I suppose the same thing happens here, people still get picked up for procaine or, you know, xylazine, ketamine, which are horse anaesthetics, that as in a horse that's gone off to the knacker. And you know, there are diseases that can be in the meat that can spread to us, as zoonoses. Bread and bakery products can have poppy seeds, which gives us a nice positive morphine. So we should think about the ease of preparation. You know, could your time be spent better off working on the dogs, physiotherapy, strengthening exercises? And why do you prepare your own diet? You know, maybe you just don't trust the dry foods. And maybe we're not certain about which one to pick, and hopefully after tonight you'll be a lot shrewder in working out which dry food to use. I think it's good to cost your diets out and compare. Avoid your honey and your simple sugars. Okay, that's pretty good. Grain-free foods, you know, there's always a big deal about grain-free foods. Often grain-free foods are made because things like sweet potatoes and pumpkins and whatever are much cheaper than the grain. Certainly, we have had some problems in non-greyhounds with cardiac disease and grain-free grain-free foods. Soak your food, I don't think it matters one way or the other. Because we tend to feed our dogs and put them back in the kennels and don't allow them to run around and bounce around, whereas most of the bloat that we see after in non-greyhounds, they've given their tea and then let Rover run loose in the backyard. Parasite control. I feel most deworming products contain these last three ingredients, and they're all essentially the same. And so I want you to look at what you do feed, use, and we should include in our rotation either some ivermectin or milbemycin. Milbemycin and ivermectin are different products, and by putting them in as a rotation, we tend to avoid, particularly with the roundworms, developing resistance to what we're using. And this chart here, where there's the same colour, these products all have the same ingredients. So if we look here, these with pyrantel and oxantal, popantal, they're Paratac, Paragard, Ilium pyroquantal, Ranvet's tablets are in there too. So there's a whole host. All these have got the same product, and you might buy a different brand and thinking, I'm changing my dewormers, but you're not. So at the end of the day, what are we going to conclude? Well, yeah, the Diets at Work said you can feed a premium food. You can feed premium food and meat only, and you can feed premium food, meat, and a carbohydrate source, rice, vegetables, pasta, it doesn't matter. A small amount of calcium won't hurt, and one good mineral vitamin product may be added, and we're okay. Righto. That's the Swampy Plain River up at Corryong, and this is the beautiful McAllister River up north of Lacola. It's about 20 kilometres away from where that bloke knocked those old two people off at Wonnangatta. And we were up there fishing at the same time. We'll involve you guys now. So did some of you bring the product labels with you off your bags? No, very few, or some did. For those of you that did, I'd just like you to have a look and see if your product's got a GA or a TA and the metabolizable energy. Which one have you got there?
Copper rice.
Is copper rice? No, we can do this together, you and I, we're legends. So there we go. Let me look over your shoulder there. So, metabolizable energy, can we find that somewhere? Is it there? Vitamins? No, it actually includes the amino acids that are in there. We've got crude protein, energy, there it is. Energy, that's right. So ME is metabolizable energy, 3,850, pretty good. And up the top it says it all, typical analysis. There it is, okay. Okay, so in your mind you think this could be out by 10%. Anyone else got one there? What do we got? What do we got? Black Hawk, okay. Black Hawk's pretty, so yeah, there's your ME, metabolizable energy, 4,090. GA or TA? Guaranteed analysis or? GA. GA, there it is. And again, that's telling us some of the amino and fatty acids that are in it. Well done. Well done. What else have we got?
Typical analysis.
So this is copper?
Yeah.
Copper dog food, typical analysis.
Yeah.
Our energy?
It is,
Yeah.
this one, 3,600.
Yeah. And say compared for a 30-20 food, what have we got? Crude protein to crude fat?
Crude protein is 26% and crude fat is 18.
Yeah, 26 to and 18. So it's getting along the right way. Okay. Anyone worried about what we're just doing there? Do you think you can all go home and look at your bags and? Okay. All right. Well, I won't spend a lot of time on that. So this is Eukanuba's typical analysis. And their first ingredient's dehydrated protein, poultry protein. So yeah, it's a bit nebulous too. We were going to weigh some food. I just might do that afterwards for anyone that's interested. But what I want to say is that the cheaper foods you would find, if you fill a cup of a cheaper food up and compare it to something like the Eukanuba or XP3020 or Black Hawk, the more expensive ones will be heavier for the same amount, for the same given volume. Now, if I haven't got this through to you already, I want you to become a Greyhound information cynic, okay? And I want to run this concept past you. This is, in statistics, this is a bell graph, and we have a normal distribution within this bell graph. So 68%, nearly 70% of whatever we're measuring fits within one standard deviation, and 95% fit within two. And this could be height or weight or response to coffee, you know, or response to medication. You know, so if it was coffee, this person down here will have half a cup of coffee and be awake for 2 days, and this person up here will have half a cup of coffee and sleep for 2 days. You know, there's this variation. And so this is human height, okay, where the average person is 177. And that majestic Collingwood footballer Mason Cox sits up one end, and the Bulldogs Caleb Daniels sits down there. Now, I'm putting this up because of, you know, the nod and the wink, you know, use my chia seed. You know, I gave my dog, I'll keep going with chia seed, and it improved 5 lengths, okay. But the chance of the rest of us giving our dog chia seed and getting it to improve 5 lengths is quite remote. It'll be an outlier here. And is it reproducible? Okay, so it happened once. Will it happen again? Years ago, when EPO, the blood stimulant, was available, I got some for one of my trainers, and he used it coming up to a big race, and he eventually won the semi-final and the final, the EPO. And he said, "Ray, it's great stuff. You just give it 24 hours before and away they go." I thought, oh, gee, that's interesting. Because EPO, when you give it, it should take at least 2 weeks to have any effect whatsoever on the blood count. So I got a few bottles and tried them on my own dogs, and I could not get a response whatsoever, either in their performance or in their blood counts, which you were supposed to do. And that harks back to what I was saying before about a dog's blood count. It is very difficult, nigh impossible, to shift a dog's red blood cell count. So I don't know what happened with that bloke. I think he just had a good dog that he trained beautifully, and the EPO he gave it made absolutely no difference to the dog's performance. It was going to win anyhow. Righto. So here we go. Product number 1. Can product number 1 help calm down my greyhound? Now, these are the claims of this product. These are the claims. So let's have a look at them one by one. High doses of product 1 are useful to calm down greyhounds, or are also useful. No definitive claim, just a maybe. And if a low dose doesn't work, then increase the dose, double the dose, triple the dose, use more of my product. And this dose will sometimes help settle nervous dogs so that they'll travel. Now, I did not include this product in any discussion that we had about nervous excitable dogs where we're using the tryptophan and Zilkine or the vitamin B1. Okay, and here's the kicker, you know, after all this talk about settling them down, and doses such as this are often used to increase the stamina and endurance of greyhounds over large distances. On an absolute different track. Product 2. Now this is a ripper. It buffers the acid build-up in muscle cells. I hope by now I've got you convinced that we don't have to worry about acid build-up in muscle cells. It stimulates the thirst response. Gee, greyhounds will drink no matter what. Very rare. Prevents dehydration, prevents muscle soreness after fast work. There will always be a little bit of soreness after fast work, and it's got a palatable flavour. Well, that's good, we can believe that. Now, what's it recommended for? This fits into every dog in our kennel, doesn't it? But, you know, so dogs in work, dogs with a history of cramping and muscle fatigue, it fits into the lot. Why would you choose this? Because it helps combat the effect of acidosis and dehydration. Oh, and up the top there, see, they get the lactic acid in. They love to get that in, and the free radicals. And it encourages dogs to drink. This was a horse product. A lot of the products we use come from horse, so it's high in salt, because horses sweat a lot when they run. Dogs don't sweat a lot. And so therefore by drinking more salt, we're going to correct post-race dehydration. How do you use it? Well, you've got to make sure there's water available at all times. You know, that's a no-brainer. That is a no-brainer. And you use 4 mils a day while the greyhound is in hard work, and you can increase it after a race. You use it for greyhounds suffering from dehydration. Or greyhounds suffering from dehydration may need a supplementary dose of electrolytes. Let's go back to the first paragraph. This stops dehydration. And the kicker is, if this doesn't work, use another one of our products. And the oil products, I'm a little bit cynical of these. They are an easy way to give your dogs oil, which is a great source of fat and therefore a great source of energy, but this product provides sufficient energy for extra hard work. It spares glycogen. It's palatable, that's great. It actually says you don't have to feed as much. But none of us are going to change our feeding habits as far as the meat or dry food that we give and try to supplement high energy oil The next line is right. The omega-3 and 6 fatty acids provide an anti-inflammatory function and a good coat. That's good, you know, because the dogs need those vegetable oils, those omega-3s and 6s to have a good coat. And they throw in this mumbo-jumbo about the heat of digestion. And this too, all of a sudden we pull the immune response out of nowhere when we're talking about energy, and they swap it to the immune response. And as another kicker, it improves fertility in breeding dogs. And there would not be one skerrick of information to support that claim. And sprint oil for greyhounds is exactly the same as sprint oil for horses. It's got the same ingredients, linoleic acid and linolenic acid. Here's our dose. And what's in canola oil? Linoleic acid and linolenic acid. Same stuff. Question the price. Okay, so read your labels carefully, and if you're not sure, go and see Dr. Moore and berate him about it. And I think, how would you feel about all that, Greg? Do you have a similar problem with? Good. Okay. Now, thank you to the 3 people that managed to email me diet sheets. That was great. And if any of you, and I've said to a couple of you, if you've still got those diet sheets and you want to email them over, I promise I'll get to them over the next couple of weeks and make some comments. That's these sheets. I think you should have all got one of those. So when I go through them, I look at the energy content of what you're feeding. I look for excessive administration of minerals and vitamins and supplements that are already in the diet. Now Bronwyn, this is Bronwyn's diet. And I reckon this is a pretty good diet. 1.5 cups of Black Hawk, 500 grams of mince, 500 grams of kangaroo. So I reckon the fat in the beef will counteract the lean kangaroo. 2 4x2 biscuits, a beetroot, grated beetroot. You grate your beetroot, don't you? Yeah. Now, you know, beetroot is a very, very nutritious vegetable. I don't want you to all start planting beetroots, but you know, it's a very rich source of minerals and vitamins and carbohydrates. There's 5 mils of sprint oil, so we put some more energy in. The epitalis is really good for joints. Why did you decide to feed epitalis? What prompted that?
I was using it to the old retired dogs that were full of arthritis and getting a good response for them, and then read that it could be used as a preventative. So it's now given to the race dog.
That's great. Well, that's good. Yeah, it really is. The other name for this is Foresight, and it really is a good nutraceutical natural product, and it's freely available on the internet. You can get it. That's interesting. It worked in the older dogs. And as I said before, the other thing that you could replace this with, which would be almost as good, is just a fish oil capsule. Because the fish oils, in the fish oil, one of the fatty acids is EPA, a eicosapentaenoic acid, and it's really quirky in dogs that it actually shuts off a gene that causes cartilage degeneration in joint. That's how it works, whereas it doesn't work the same way in people or horses. Then Bronwyn feeds some black tar, which is a vitamin and mineral mix, and some banana feed B, which is again minerals and vitamins, fairly high in starch, and we're not sure, we were looking at the bag before, we're not sure whether it's cooked or not. It's granular. If it's not cooked, then we might have some problems. Tin of sardines per dog? Yeah. 3 times a week. That's great. Lots of people do that. Good source of protein, good source of oils, and the omega-3s in here are similar to the epitalis, so it will help with joint disease. And some race day honey.
Getting rid of that as
Yeah. Okay. So for those that didn't hear, Bronwyn says she's throwing that out, and that'd be right. Now, I calculated your energy to be 3,000. And I'm assuming the right size cups and things like that. But if you think back to As a Party's diet or Robbie Britton's diet, that's, you know, there's a lot of energy in Bronwood's diet, which is fine. But it's providing 24% from protein and 35% for fat. So it's in the right ballpark. That's pretty good. How do your dogs look?
Good.
Oh, and you can say sensational. Yeah. And that's a great parameter. Okay, so if we look at that, now you can all be critics and work out what we're going to do. Well, you know, the honey's out. We all agree we throw the honey out. Yeah. I would just question whether we're not duplicating things here in a big way. And it may be that you could probably feed a little bit less kangaroo mince, but I don't want to rock the boat too much. That's fine, the epitalus is fine. Yeah, so we wouldn't tweak that too much at all.
They're big, as you said, cups. That's a big cup compared to some...
Yes.
That's the Black Hawk cup that comes with it.
Yeah.
And that's 200, I weighed it 200 grams for just a very level.
Wow, wow.
So,
Okay, well I calculated yours at 1.5.
yeah, no, it's 200.
Yeah, so to be even higher. The energy would be even higher because on my calculations that, you know, I've just used 1.5 cups, about 200 grams, but you're using 300 grams. That's okay. Fine, and race morning, race day?
I like what you put up with As a Party's giving them a quarter of their diet for breakfast. I think I'll be going to that rather than doing the milk, the biscuits and the honey. Yeah.
Okay.
I learnt something.
Yeah. Okay. Sarah and Graham's diet. So we've got, if we go back, anyone want to make any comments about that? You know, feel free to yell.
A lot of meat.
A lot of meat. Yeah.
It's a lot of meat, yeah. So what would we do? What would you knock out?
Depends if it's a bitch or a dog. So you go 750, maybe dog. It depends how much you weigh.
Yeah.
So if you're giving a bitch that, oh my God.
Yeah, and 750 is what most people will say for their big dogs and 500 for their bitches, of meat. And particularly because we now know that the Black Hawk, which is a good food, is even in higher proportions.
You could save a lot of money there.
Yeah.
So dear.
Yeah, so this would be an interesting one to cost out. We haven't got time to do it now, but you know, versus just dry food and meat. You know, say as Leonie fed with her dogs. Anyone else want to have a? No.
You talk about pre-race feed. How long before the race do you feed that pre-race?
The question is, how long before a race do you pre-race? Well, you know, breakfast is breakfast, and very few races start before 11. Do you race before 11 over here? 11 a.m. Yeah. I would allow 4 hours. I would allow 4 hours for that to get digested and through. But we're really, you know, some people give nothing on race days. Some of the bigger trainers give nothing. I think we're giving it to the dogs to make us feel better, to make the dogs feel better. It certainly doesn't help. It certainly doesn't hurt them feeding. But if you remember what I said before about, you know, when you get to race day, your dog's locked and loaded. You know, it's got all the energy there that it should need to race. Okay, because if it was a trialling day, you'd probably take them out, put them in the trailer, take them off and trial them and be back home by 10 or 11, you know, and they've raced on an empty tummy. So the energy's there. We don't have to do too much with them on race day. Righto, now this is Sarah and Graham's diet. Club a working dog, typical analysis. not a GA, so that's a bit variable. For breakfast they get some milk and yogurt, 200 grams of minced beef and 200 grams of chicken. So now we've whacked the fat in. Good fat and protein with the chicken. Now I talked to Sarah about this, and this mixture gets done, gets made up based on the availability of, there's meat goes in that, isn't there, Sarah, in that, yeah, in that stew. So they get a stew 2 to 3 times a week. The only comment I made to Sarah, it'd be nice if you could get it all together and freeze, you know, a week at a time, so that you could even that out and feed that same amount every day. 1 egg, that's not going to hurt. Energy oil, that's fine. And Sarah makes this, so it's vegetables, peanut butter.
Yeah, I just get it from the organic market.
Yeah.
And they're just organic dog treats that I like to.
Oh, you buy them?
Yes.
Yeah, you don't make them.
I used to make them, but for, at that point, 16 dogs, it became a bit of a chore.
It's a lot of peanut butter.
Yeah.
That's fine. And how often do they have those treats?
Every time I go up there, so maybe 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah, okay. Okay. The dogs...
Just a small thing like this, and they love it.
Yeah, it's my next question. The dogs love it, yeah. Yeah. You know, for I think most of us here are probably smaller trainers. That's the difference, I think, with us compared to the bigger trainers, that you really bond with the dogs and they do well for us. Okay, so the treat sardines 3 times a week. That's great. Bronwyn did the same thing. The calcium carbonate powder, that's okay. Half a teaspoon or 2? Half a teaspoon, right. Now then we've got some Sprinter Gold Muscle Pro, which is a high protein, it's made from milk powder, minerals and vitamins. Then we've got some Beta Cell, which is an electrolyte mixture, rich in potassium. It's got lactate and citrate in it as well. Then we've got some more potassium. Then we've got brewer's yeast, which is minerals and vitamins and protein. So, you know, there's 4 products there that are probably interchangeable. I would definitely get rid of one of the potassium supplements, and I'd suggest to a lot of you, you can probably just delete your potassium supplements if after tonight, if you know, particularly if you're feeding a good quality dry food, the potassium will be there, and just assess the difference. That's what you need to do. If you drop that out of your diet and your trialling times goes off, well, back on the potassium. But we kind of discovered potassium in the 80s. It really became the flavour of the month. Everyone jumped on it, and then lots of people started making them. What do you do with potassium, Greg? You a big rap for it? Okay, bit of a shake of the head there. Okay, so Sarah's diet's 2,200 kilocalories. The energy from protein and fat are in the right order. And now Sarah has a partner, Graham, who feeds entirely different on race day. It's a cause of consternation. So Graham just gives them breakfast, and Sarah adds Rapid K, energy oil, meat and yogurt. Now, this is not a lot. It's
a golf ball size.
Yeah. So I would contend that you've got more potassium. You've already loaded the dog up on that. The energy oil is certainly not going to hurt. He'd like the meat. There's probably nothing there that hurts. I'm just not so certain that it's going to make a whole lot of difference.
Makes me feel better.
It makes... Sarah, look, that's a big factor. It makes you feel better. Yeah, that's okay. So, I don't know what you're going to tell Graham when you go home. Now, Nathan. Is Nathan here? Thank you. Thank you. Yours came in late last night, and I did a backward somersault when I read it. Because how long have you been using this diet for?
18 months.
18 months, yeah. So you discovered what my 6th diet that works. what he discovered. So Nathan's virtually got an XP 30-20 and mincemeat diet. Okay. Bit of cod liver oil, that's not going to hurt. You know, it's rich in vitamin A, vitamin D, and the omega-3s, EPA and DHA. Okay. Then Nathan gives some Livermol, which is sort of protein, mineral, vitamins, a multi-everything mix, some CoQ10. What inspired that?
What did he say?
I listen to a bloke on 3AW every Sunday morning talk about CoQ10. It seems it's very good for us with heart disease.
Yes.
I can't comment on its use in greyhounds. I'm sure it won't hurt. It's ubiquinol, isn't it? I think. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now, then you've got your thyroxine tablets. How many dogs you got in work? 5. I'd knock the thyroxine off 3 of them and leave the other 2 on and check the difference. And I was talking with Greg during the break, and he's certainly of the same opinion that me. They're probably doing nothing, mate.
Yeah, on that one there, I put it with the wrong one for the female pill, the hormone pill, so I don't use that.
You don't use thyroxine? Oh, you've got it mixed up.
You read the line wrong.
Oh, okay. Well done. Well, that makes your diet even better. In view of the Livermol, I'd question whether you need the potassium plus. I'd question that. Your calcium powder's fine. Calcium powder's fine. And you've got quite an energy-dense diet, which we'd expect from the XP 30-20, 2,400 kilocalories, and your protein and fat in a good ratio. Now, then your race day feeding varies. If it's a night race, it's a normal breakfast. Yep, that works. Any milk in with that, or no? Water? Just water?
Water, yeah.
Well done, well done. And post-race, they get their evening meal, and then they get the KO cleans and flushes. What inspired that?
Just word of mouth.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's how we spread things.
We all used to use it years ago, and then everyone was told not to use it.
Sorry, can you yell that again?
We all used to use that years ago. The
Yeah.
flushes and all that.
Yeah.
At the end, but now, and then about 4 or 5 years ago, everyone said, don't use it.
Yeah.
I don't know why, so we just stopped using it.
I think it must be a bit of a South Australia thing.
Why?
Does anyone else use that product? No? I came across it several months ago, and I couldn't work it out. Why it worked, and I contacted the company, and I got some mumbo-jumbo answer back from them with not a lot of valid data. So, yeah, potassium nitrate is gunpowder, saltpetre. The colophony is a tar extract, and I think it's got some what we call diuretic, kidney flush effect. Magnesium sulfate, well, that's just a source of magnesium. The hexamine is fine. Okay, the hexamine is what's in the urinary antiseptic Hiprex, you know, which I don't know whether anyone still uses it post-race. Some trainers would use it post-race when they were worried about a urinary tract infection. I don't know, mate. I can't validate it. I don't think it's causing any harm, but is it expensive?
30 odd bucks.
30 odd bucks, yeah. I just lost the email. I went scrounging through my emails. I lost the email that the company sent me, but it certainly wasn't convincing. So, yeah. And your dog doesn't need its kidneys flushed. No, but well done. Good diet. All right. So we're just about done. So over to you guys. Anything else you want to throw at me?
As far as fruit is concerned, which fruits are better, or do you cook them, put them in the...
Yeah, fruit. Well, bananas are good. Yeah, and I think a lot of us will sneak a bit of banana in. They're not commonly used. If you had an excess of apples or something like that, well, I'd cook them for sure to reduce the starch content so that I don't upset the tummies, but their tummies. But no, I don't have a great opinion. Yes.
After post the race, I use recharge, water and milk.
Hang on, start again.
After a race, I use recharge, water and milk. Would you suggest the Sustagen would be better than using a recharge after a race?
Yes, I would. Okay, so would I suggest that Sustagen's better than recharge? Yeah, there's more protein and carbohydrates in the Sustagen. Recharge is a good product, but I think Sustagen is better, and the dogs like it. You know, across the board, the dogs like it. Yeah.
Are we able to get copies of your notes from tonight?
Kirsty, what are we going to do about notes? The question is, are we going to get copies of notes? Probably. Yeah. Okay. I'll send this to Kirsty as a PDF, and she can send it out to you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I don't mind if you send me emails. I just sometimes take a while to answer them, that's all.
I just had a question. Hemp seed is becoming quite a popular supplement. Obviously, is there any risk of that being a cannabis positive or anything, or do you have any feelings on hemp seed as a supplement?
Why do you want to feed hemp seed? Sorry, I've got to turn around.
No, that's all right. I've heard it's sort of similar to the chia seed and stuff, that it was like anti-inflammatory properties, good fat ratios and that kind of thing.
Look, I don't know. I did look at it. Not so long ago, and I thought there's no need to add it. You know, I think we're trying to reinvent the wheel. Look, I'll have a look for you. I don't think it's in the same category as chia, but these are hemp seeds, aren't they?
Yep.
Yeah. And I don't know whether there's any cannabinoids in that, and I would suspect there would be. So I'd be really cautious about that. Yeah. How we going?
There was mention about something to do with the Mars bar. Was that after race?
Yes.
I thought chocolate was really bad for dogs.
Lots of chocolate is, whether you're a dog or us, is bad for us. But, you know, for a dog to be sick, they've got to really eat half a block of chocolate at least. And it makes them all nervous and anxious, so you eat the chocolate. Yes, certainly a Mars bar only after a race. After any chocolate to a dog, I would allow at least 4 days before I race them again. Yeah. Do you have out-of-comp testing here too? Yeah. Oh, well, you can just explain that away that way. But no. But you're never going to feed a greyhound enough chocolate to make it sick, unless it gets your Easter eggs or something.
Right. One of the things that you've talked about before.
Hang on, Judy. I can't even hear you there.
That's unusual for people not to hear me. One of the things you said before was about knackeries. I don't know if you know or not, but we don't have knackeries in South Australia unless people are bringing meat over from Victoria. All of our abattoirs are human consumption, so we don't bump into some of the problems that you would in Victoria and New South Wales.
And Queensland. Okay, that's interesting. So what do you pay a kilogram for your dog meat?
A lot.
A lot? Well,
about $5. Well, I just bought 225 kilos of brew, which was $888.
225. That's about $30 a kilo.
No, about 4. I'll get 225 kilos.
For $800?
$888. So it's $4 odd a kilo.
Okay.
About $4.50 or something.
Yeah, oh, well, that's pretty reasonable. Yeah.
And the rest.
Oh, so you'd have pretty good quality control over that. We just wouldn't know what the fat content would be across the board, but there'd be a fair bit of fat in it.
Yeah. There's no fat in the roux, but in the beef and things like that you get a fair bit of fat in.
Okay. Yeah, there's no fat in kangaroo.
No.
No. Do we get many drug positives then? Sort of xylazine?
A few. Procaine. Very rare.
Rare to get a procaine positive, yeah.
I mean, it's basically, and people can understand that the farmer wants to get rid of a cow that's got mastitis or whatever, or she's gone down, and so he may not tell the truth about what treatment the cow's on and when it's been on before it goes to a knackery. So of course the poor person who ends up with the green dream bit ends up with the green dream bit and all the rest of it and all the other antibiotics, particularly if it's a mastitis. So, but we're lucky in that sense that most of the meat doesn't come from knackeries.
But a lot of the beef comes from Victoria.
That's
too.
the trouble we have.
A lot of the beef can come from Victoria that's selling in pet shops and so forth.
Right, yeah. And then we're in trouble. You know, in Victoria, GRV say, butchers meat only 3 or 4 days before. But people still, they still get caught with it. It's just seems dumb to me. But anyhow.
Ray, some trainers, I believe, use cranberry and celery seed for dogs that find it difficult to pee after a race. What are your thoughts?
Okay, cranberry and celery seeds. Celery seed I thought was more for arthritis. Cranberry's a good urinary antiseptic. Okay. But for male dogs that are having trouble peeing afterwards, that's what we're talking about, yeah, that's very, very rarely an infective problem. Very rarely. It's more a stress problem when the nerves that control the prostate and the neck of the bladder spasm up, because the treatment is to give them Buscopan, a muscle relaxant. If they are tied...
Positive. That'll test positive.
Oh yeah. But if you've got a dog that does this, you would race him, and as soon as you get him home, you would give him his Buscopan, and if he needs it the next morning, give him his Buscopan, and then again that's a 3 or 4 day washout. And sometimes a little bit of Valium helps relax them too. Again, you've got another 3 or 4 days washout.
Haven't got any Valium.
You've got cranberry juice, but cranberry juice is
cranberry capsule.
Yeah, it's the same. It's a common and effective. See, they use it in nursing homes.
You're not against it? That's
No,
right.
no, and it would be quite nutritious. If a dog's blocked up, is having trouble with this post-race dysuria where they can't pedal properly. And if they really do block up, then we can get an infection. So some antibiotics or Hiprex, the stuff that's in this hexamine here, that would be in order. But look, we used to reckon there was, or the folklore would have it, that there's a lot of urinary tract infections in dogs, but the reality is that, most of you race your dogs in and out day after day, and there's no urinary tract infections here. And similarly, when you've got your dogs back from broken in, I'll give them a course of antibiotics to clean them out. It's an inappropriate use of antibiotics. The dogs didn't need it. More importantly, they needed a good deworming and a good load of fat in their diet to fatten them up. Yeah.
Just talking of puppies, rearing them, I've used a lot of chicken whole frames and then ground chicken mince, and someone said you shouldn't feed a lot of chicken to pups. They couldn't tell me why.
No, I can't either. Okay, I'm really happy to feed chicken mince and chicken frames and what have you to pups. Yeah, lots of people do that. lots and lots of people, because it's got such a, oh, we got a vote, did we? It's such a good source of fat for young puppies. Pardon me, and there's, you know, there's not a load of meat in it, so there's not a lot of phosphorus, and there's bone, so we've got some calcium in there too. Yeah.
I use lard, but I put it in a pot and I heat it up and then spoon it out and put it over the meat. Does that kill any of the goodness?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. And lard's sort of probably lard, the pork fat second after the chicken fat. It's a really good source of the linoleic acid, the fats, yeah. So your dog's got a nice shiny coat?
Oh, yeah. But interestingly enough, I get it from a company that supplies cake food, and that's, the lard actually goes into the cake.
Yeah, to provide some fat in there. Yeah, no, I'm very happy with pork lard, and it's easier to source pork lard than it is you know, fresh, you know, individual chicken fat. So yeah, that's good. Dripping, you know, beef dripping is good too. How are we going? I think you're beaten, aren't you? All right. Okay. Look. You guys have been. You guys have been great. You know, I hope you've got something out of the night. Hope you at least got one thing. Let's all socialise our dogs, because as an industry we've got to get them all adopted out. You know, so got to look after our old dogs and get them into gap homes. It's really important. You know, I don't know what your numbers are, but you know, in Victoria we have over 10,000 adopted dogs. You know, 10,000 adopted dogs wandering around. You wander around the inner city and every second dog's a greyhound. We just got to get more vets to learn to look after them. Yeah. Okay, all right, we'll call it quits. Thank you very much.